What's up, everyone? Welcome back to episode 38 of the Just Sayin Podcast. You got your co-hosts Jake and Sutton here. Sutton, there's some big news today. I mean, we're going to talk about the SEC later. We're going to talk about the biggest players that each team needs to replace, and Texas and Oklahoma coming in. But I mean, number one, what we need to talk about is Kalen DeBoer and the staff, and no longer Caleb Downs, a Crimson
Well, we
Tide.
think we think he's in the portal, could still come back.
He is,
Have
yeah.
heard some stuff about there's some smoke on him coming back, but definitely doesn't look good.
The reason, I mean, because he at first this morning he was thinking about entering the transfer portal, and then about I think it happened around 6 my time, he officially entered the portal. And this guy, I mean, his dad said he wants the decision made within 48 hours. I think he already has the decision made up. I think we're going to get a decision tomorrow, officially what it's going to be. But yeah, you just go ahead. If you want to talk about Caleb Downs, go ahead. Just whatever you want to talk about the Alabama staff, go ahead and
Yeah, well,
kick
we
us off.
can we can run through the players to start. Jake, I'll just say this.
There's a lot of them.
Since the
There's a lot of
2000
them.
since the 2023 football season that ended 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago for Alabama, there have been 37 players from last year's Alabama team that will not be on the team next year. There's 11 NFL draft picks or 11 guys going to the NFL draft. Don't know if they'll all be picked, but let me run through the position groups at Alabama and just tell you how gutted this roster currently is. So at quarterback, two guys, Tyler Buckner, Eli Holstein. At receiver, four, Ja'Cory Brooks, Isaiah Bond, Malik Benson, Shaz Preston. Tight end, two,
Wait,
Amari.
Jermaine Burton too.
Well, I'm talking just okay, sorry. This is
Oh,
transfer portal. This
just
is transfer portal.
transferred.
Tight end, Amari Niblack, Miles Kitselman. O-line, Seth McLaughlin, Terrence Ferguson, now Caden Proctor, All-American freshman. Um, he apparently, just to go on a tangent about Caden Proctor, he apparently is homesick. So he will be going in all likelihood back to Iowa. I guess Iowa State could be in play, but he was committed to Iowa before he went to Alabama as a freshman. 247's already 100%ed him crystal ball to Iowa, and he entered the portal like 8 hours ago. D line, you got four: Monkel Goodwin, Anquin Barnes, Isaiah Hastings, Hunter Osborne. Inside linebacker, you've got four: Kendrick Blackshear, Sean Murphy, Ian Jackson, Justin Jefferson. You got four corners: Trey Amos, who was going to be cornerback one next year, Antonio Kite and Des Ricks, who are going to be competing for cornerback two, and Earl Little the second. And that safety, like you said, Caleb Downs, the best freshman college football player last year in 2023, one of the best players going in next season, certainly one of the best safeties in college football. He's in the portal. Christian Story, and then now Georgia player Jake Pope. So that was 26 players that have entered the transfer portal in the last 3 weeks for Alabama, not to mention the 11 NFL draft picks. So you've got that. And then just the staff turnover too. Former offensive coordinator Tommy Rees, now it's Alex Grubbs. Um,
Wait, Tommy Reese was fired?
yes, Tommy Rees is not going
I
to be
did not know that.
Tommy Rees is not going to be the offensive coordinator at Alabama. It's going to be Alex
Good
Grubbs.
for them.
The running back coach one of two coaches back is the running back coach, Robert Gillespie. Receiver coach Holloman Wiggins went to Texas A&M, so we brought in Jamarcus Shepard. Love the hire, especially he was Washington's receiver coach last year, so obviously tons of talent were in that room, and he developed them very well. Tight end went from Joe Cox to Nick Sheridan, also Washington. O-line, Eric Wolford.
Wait. Joe Cox, is that the Joe Cox?
Yeah, this is the Joe Cox is not a coach at Alabama anymore.
No, the former Georgia QB? Is that him?
I don't know if that's him, but it
We
could
had a QB named Joe Cox in like 2006.
that would fit the timeline because he is a younger guy. But Eric Wolford, former Kentucky O-line coach, was that O-line coach for Bama for 2 or 3 years. Gone. It is now Scott Huff. Was that Joe Cox? Is Joe Cox the former
Yeah,
Georgia?
that was him.
Okay, so
Ah,
yeah, he's gone. Um,
cool.
Kevin Steele retired, and this is what I love. This is what I absolutely love. Is Caitlin DeBoer went out and got a head coach, the head coach of South Alabama, who had a very good season last year. We talked about him a couple of times on the show. Actually, they were able to knock off Oklahoma State last year. But Kane Womack is going to be the Alabama defensive coordinator. Super excited about that hire. Very good recruiter. Recruited out of his league at South Alabama. So can't wait to see what he does, especially with his defense, which defense I still think has the potential to be pretty good next year, especially in the front seven. D-line, the last guy that stayed, only two coaches stayed from Saban's staff, and it's Freddie Roach, another great recruiter, especially with SEC ties. At inside linebacker and outside linebacker, we don't know who the new coach is going to be. He hasn't hired one yet. But Robert Bala is out. Coleman Hutzler, the new defensive coordinator for Mississippi State, so he's obviously out. And then the big one, Travarius Robinson, the DB coach, now at Georgia, co-defensive coordinator, tried to get him back, but he wanted to go ahead and move on to Georgia. Well, Travarius Robinson's great, love him. I don't think Maurice Linguist, who our new DB coach will be as better than Travarius Robinson, especially not recruiting. He, however, is about as good as you're going to get. He's a great recruiter, former Buffalo head coach this past year, so he'll also serve as the co-DC to Kane Womack. So a lot of really good former head coaches that are here at Alabama now. Still don't have a special teams coordinator or safeties coordinator, but two former head coaches on this staff now. And then Alex Grubbs is, I mean, Alabama, Nick Saban last season before hiring Tommy Rees interviewed Alex Grubbs for the offensive coordinator spot, and he turned us down. So him coming is another just big in the way that they've been able to develop offense at Washington around Michael Penix. Very excited about him and the potential that he brings. I think this offense is going to be humming next year. I mean, it's going to be a little bit tough since we're a little thin at receiver. Got plenty of talent at receiver, just very young, very inexperienced. But excited to see what happens with Jalen Milroe and his growth this offseason. And obviously, we still got one of the better running back coaches in college football, and we've got great running backs coming back as of right now. They haven't entered the portal yet, so Gillespie's going to keep that train rolling. So this is what I've been telling all my friends, Jake, and I think you can kind of appreciate what I'm about to say. But you actually before the show we were talking, and I said, I only thought there'd be 5 or 6 transfers going into the cycle, but I also was under the impression that Kalen DeBoer would keep many of the guys that we have here because of their ties to the South and recruiting. But Kalen DeBoer has, with the statement he's made with these firings and hires, is he doesn't care about SEC ties. He doesn't care about South ties. He's going to go in and he's going to recruit. It doesn't matter what region of the country he's in. I mean, he's been in the Midwest, he's been in the North, he's been on the coast, he's been everywhere, and he's recruited well for the school he's been at. But Alabama's a different element. We know that you have to be top 5, at least top 10, and top 10 may not even cut it at Alabama. So we'll see what happens in the next few years. I'm not going to judge Kalen DeBoer off his year 1, maybe even year 2 results from the team. I'm not going to judge any of that. I don't know what that is, but I'm not going to judge any of that based off his next couple seasons. However, I do think Alabama is still going to be a very good team. I still think the ceiling is a 12-0 regular season. I think that's still the ceiling. I'll give the floor 7-5, but that's a wide gap, right? Like that's a very wide gap. I think you're looking the most possible record for next year, I think, is 9-3, 10-2. And every other college football team across the country with a first-year head coach would love that record, especially in the SEC. But Alabama fans like myself are going to and have to temper their expectations for this coaching staff, and especially now that our roster is being gutted. Most of the players that have left, I'm not too mad about leaving. But then there's a few guys like Isaiah Bond, Amari Niblack, Caden Proctor, Caleb Downs, that those are huge losses. Trey Amos, those are huge losses to the team and not going to be easy to replace. But what has Kalen DeBoer done everywhere he's been? A lot of places he's had the second best roster on the field and end up winning a football game. So he's shown that he can do it before at Washington, at Fresno, at Sioux Falls, where he won 3 NAIA national championships, went 67-3 over 5 seasons. I think Alabama hired the right guy. I fully trust in what Kalen DeBoer is doing. I think it may take some time, especially in the SEC, especially in a region he's not familiar with recruiting wise. But the transfer portal should only help Alabama in the coming years when he's trying to get his foothold recruiting. So I don't know how you like the hire. I know you're a Georgia fan, so it doesn't pertain to you as much. But I want to get your opinion on just kind of what I just said, what Kalen DeBoer's kind of first impression has been on you as a Georgia fan.
Yeah, it's just funny. This time last week, you said it was a 99% chance that Dan Lanning was going to be the coach. It was all but guaranteed the next day. And then all of a sudden, it's Kalen DeBoer. And I forgot we haven't even talked about it really. Um, I think it was a really good hire. I think Kalen DeBoer, like you said, all he does is win. There were better options on the table. Um, I don't know what happened with Lane Kiffin. Dan Lanning said no. Sark said no. Mike Norvell got an extension.
Lane Kiffin was never offered.
I didn't. Yeah,
And
I.
this is
I
from what I understand, this is what happened. This is rumors. This is speculation. This is what I've heard. Saban retired a week ago today. A week ago today. So that night, Alabama athletic director Greg Byrne got on a plane, and none of this is confirmed. I'm just saying this is speculation. What I've read off message boards. He got on a plane and flew to Austin, Texas. He met with Steve Sarkisian, and Steve Sarkisian turned him down. Then he got on a plane and flew to Seattle, Washington. So Kalen DeBoer was his number two. Dan Lanning was supposedly never in this. Mike Norvell was never in this. And actually, I was at the press conference on Sunday, or excuse me, Saturday, when they introduced DeBoer, and he said, Greg Burns said he was in Seattle on Thursday and Friday, and was back Friday night in Tuscaloosa to welcome DeBoer as the head coach of Alabama. So the timeline matches up there. Don't know about the Texas thing, but he was on a plane flying somewhere Wednesday night, said he was in Seattle on Thursday and Friday. So
that's
who knows if
I'm-
that's a true story, but it sounds
that's
like
interesting.
the Dan Lanning hype was never there. That was just all smoke. Mike Norvell, all smoke. All Lane Kiffin, I know Lane Kiffin was never considered because the boosters at Alabama don't like him. So for
Yeah,
what that's how he is, on Twitter and stuff. But that's kind
I'm
of what
not saying. I'm not saying that's a lie, but if Dan Lanning was not a top two choice, that's odd. I think he should have been number one. But anyway, I think it's a good hire. Like we said,
yeah.
everywhere he goes, he wins. However, he hasn't had to do that somewhere like Alabama. And is, I don't know his process yet because he's not a great recruiter. And Washington is an extremely hard place to recruit. It's kind of impossible to have a top 10, top 15 class. But he wasn't even doing top 15, top 20. He was outside the top 25, I think, all 3 years or
I think
two
he
years.
had 30 one year. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was the highest. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, even with that, he hasn't been recruiting great. And he developed great. The transfer portal has helped a lot, but recruiting is a big thing, especially with all these players leaving. And we've seen him turn over the staff, and whether it's losing or getting rid of, I mean, he's losing these guys that have ties to the South, and that's why, I mean, amidst all the transfer portal guys and people going to the NFL, there's also been a ton of decommits. Obviously, Ryan Williams decommitted. Jamie French, a five-star wide receiver for 2025, decommitted. Four-star inside O lineman from Georgia decommitted. Zion Grady decommitted today. There's another big one that I'm missing.
There's been some, and there's going to continue to
Oh,
be.
one more. Yeah, yeah. But there's gonna be more. So I don't think that's something we're gonna have figured out until we see next year's class. What and I think it's a learning curve for him. I don't even think he might act confident. I don't think he knows that he's gonna succeed recruiting wise. Because I don't know. We've become accustomed to Alabama always having a top five class, always having a top three class. That was with Nick Saban, who really knows what what drew people to Tuscaloosa outside of Nick Saban. Because I think a lot of it was just built by him. And of course, Kalen DeBoer has all that at his disposal. Nick Saban's still kind of there. I mean, he has an office in Bryant Denny. And so he's still kind of there. But I mean, this is Kalen DeBoer's program now. So I'm interested to see how it goes. I don't think we're going to get any of that figured out. And one of the interesting things, Travarius Robinson, has so many ties to the South. One of the best recruiters in the SEC. He's had like 8 5 stars in total from his time. I think he was at Auburn, South Carolina, and then Bama. He's had a lot of 5 stars. And I don't know the timing of any of this. I don't know if Kirby wanted him before he knew Nick Saban was going to be retired. I don't know that, but we hired him shortly after. I think it was 3 days after Nick Saban retired. We brought him here not as our DB's coach. He's our safeties coach, and then is going to be co-defensive coordinator because Will Muschamp is being moved to an analyst role just to spend more time with his family. So he's taking over for Will Muschamp. Um, but then one day after, it was less than 24 hours after, it was like 20 hours after we hired him, posted him, he changed his Twitter bio, everything like that. It was linked that he was not going to, he was taking a visit back to Tuscaloosa to interview for the DC job. And what I heard is that he was offered the job, but he turned it down, acknowledged his commitment to Georgia, doubled down on it. And then since then, we've seen their secondary kind of go up in smoke. Most recently with Caleb Downs today, and like I said last week I wasn't very serious. But I did say imagine a Malachi Starks, Caleb Downs scenario together roaming the secondary. At that time, if you would have asked me the percentage of that happening, I would have said like 5, maybe max 10. I would say there's like a 80% chance now. He just got a crystal ball to Georgia today, and all we know is Jake Pope is punching the air right now because he went
Yes,
to Bama.
dude, that was the
He
same
went
thing
to
I
Bama,
said.
fell in the depth chart, transferred to Georgia like 5 days ago, and then all of a sudden Caleb Downs might be coming here and he's going to be buried on the depth chart again.
The
So
same dude that did it to him in Alabama.
you just got to feel bad for the man. But
Oh,
dude,
I don't at all.
Malachi Starks, Caleb Downs secondary, dude, that's dangerous.
Well,
I
I
was so
love
excited
Alabama.
thinking about it earlier today. I'm so excited thinking
Well,
about it
you
now.
also got
It's
to watch out
crazy.
for Ohio State because I've heard they're
Yeah,
throwing
we do.
back Caleb Downs.
See, but the thing is, the reason that does not scare me, Caleb Downs does not care about money. He doesn't care even a little bit
Well,
about it.
everyone says that, and then how are you supposed to know that when you get when you get a check thrown in front of your face? You don't know that.
It's
When
it's
has he ever
because
done that? He hasn't.
it's
He
it's
hasn't.
because Ohio State, Bama, Georgia, we know this. They don't offer a ton of money.
Ohio State is starting
I
to.
promise you, Ohio State is not throwing the biggest bag at him. I promise you, Texas is. Florida State, if they can get in there, they will. Auburn, if they can somehow manage to get in there, they will. Georgia and Ohio State are not going to be offering the biggest package. They're going to offer him a chance to go to the league, potentially win a national title. The whole reason he committed to Nick Saban. It's going to be the same belief with that. It's just I don't know the reason why he went into the portal, but I don't think that can happen now at Bama. He was obviously still going to be a first rounder, but the national title part, the developers, because like I said, that coaching staff is, you know,
Well,
lacking.
like
So
I said at the beginning of the show, it's been an interesting timeline as far as everything's gone down. I know DeBoer had a team meeting Friday when he landed in Tuscaloosa, and Downs was at the team meeting, but pretty much the day after T. Rob left, you started hearing rumblings about Caleb Downs, and a lot of these guys are leaving because of T. Rob. I mean, and a lot of these guys have connections with former coaches on the team. I mean, you've seen a few guys. I think Des Ricks got locked to, or he committed to
he
Texas.
committed to A&M.
Holloman Wiggins was his recruiter in high school, and Holloman Wiggins is now the receiver coach at Texas A&M. So the old adage of guys commit to a team, but they commit to a coach. You've seen that in Alabama. That has been true. I mean, that's been exactly what it was supposed to be. And I think a lot of the guys in the secondary are leaving because of T Rob, like you said. But and Caleb Downs is no stranger to that. I
I
do
mean,
think
it
that Georgia is in the
he
lead for him,
just
but he could come back to Alabama. You never know. So we're
yeah.
certainly trying to get it back as bad as possible.
I don't like how people hate the transfer portal for that reason. Um, it is what it is when people leave, if their coach is still there, if they have playing time. But if your coach is gone, I mean, Caleb Downs, a lot of people that go to Bama go for Nick Saban or went for Nick Saban, I guess now. Um, and so just imagine you take a job with a company you really like, with a manager you really like, and then all of a sudden you've been there for a year and he leaves. And it's a really small company because these universities are huge, but there's not a lot of employees on the staff, like high, uh, tight knit employees on the staff. So just imagine like your best friend on the staff leaves. You're not going to want to work there very long. You're going to want to find something bigger and better. And the grass isn't always greener. I think Kirby and Nick Saban have both said that a lot of times. the grass isn't always greener. That's why you see some transfers die out, have to go to 4 different schools, end up getting a job selling insurance, whatever. But then also it is greener. Sometimes they go first overall, like Joe Burrow. So Caleb Downs, it doesn't make a difference for him. He's going to be a first round pick. Caden Proctor, it doesn't make a difference for him. He's going to be a first round pick. So it is what it is. If
It
I was
sucks
an
for
Alabama fan,
Alabama. It
I
sucks.
would be kind of scared.
Well, I'm not really scared. Like I said, I am excited for the future with Kalen DeBoer. I think it's going to be fine. I'm not scared really at all. I'm very appreciative for the guys that have stayed. Guys like Malachi Moore, guys like Jalen Milrow, guys like Tyler Booker who have doubled down and said, "We're committed to Alabama. We're going to stay here. We're going to see this through." And those three guys are going to go down as legends because they're going to be cornerstones of not only Nick Saban's ending legacy in Tuscaloosa, but also the beginning of a new era that Alabama fans haven't been able to witness in a long time. And so those guys will be cornerstones to the roster next year, big time leaders on the team. And
Yeah,
yes, the grass can be greener on the other side. Yes, Caden Proctor and Caleb Downs they're always going to be a first round pick, but it does speak to a lot of for guys to stay, guys to trust in a coaching staff they hadn't met for the first time until a week ago. And also what's been interesting to see, Jake, is the 2024 class that's enrolled early. None of them have hit the transfer portal yet. Not one player from that single class. And yes, Ryan Williams has decommitted, but it is looking like he's going to come back to Alabama. I mean, and if he does, he'll be a day one player. He'll be the best receiver on the team day one. So DeBoer has done a good job of keeping the new guys in. It's really the class of 2023, the freshmen from this past year. Most of them have decided to hit the door. And then obviously the guys who are already kind of buried on the depth chart. So I'm not too worried, not too scared. Um, the worst part of all of this is the timing because Alabama's can't really get anybody out of the transfer portal from other schools unless you've already entered it or unless you go to South Alabama, Buffalo, Arizona, San Jose State, or Washington. And I'm sure next show we'll talk more about that because I expect a lot of these guys that are in the portal from Washington, the Jabbar Muhammads, those type of guys to commit to Alabama. And we'll talk. I'm sure we'll hit that down the road. But it's just it puts yourself in a bad position. I saw a tweet from somebody on three today that this calendar, and we've talked about it before, the calendar is going to get fixed after this year, especially with the playoff. But they need to take this situation that happened to Alabama into consideration. Yes, it sucks for Alabama, and I'm sure a lot of people don't really care because it's Alabama, and we've won for so long. People are like, "Oh, screw them," whatever. Unless it was Auburn, I probably would feel bad for the other team because just the window, the opportunities that you have for players are not there. And you really won't have that opportunity until after spring. So Alabama may not even hit the cap for scholarships this year given out to players, just because I mean, right now, what is 37 subtract 85? That's like what, 48? So we currently have 48 players on scholarship and we can fill out 85. I mean, I'm not sure how many more players I hope we can get up to 70 guys on scholarship. I don't think we
Well,
will.
it's
So,
48 plus your signing class.
yeah, so 48 plus
And y'all have
25.
like about
So
25
25, well, 24. So that's what, 62?
plus plus all the how many transfers have you had so far? 3, 4?
3.
So you're at
Yeah,
about you're at 65.
72, 72, 72.
I thought you were at 62.
51 plus 25, adding the 3. 73. So,
Let's
I mean,
go, journalism major. Come
yeah,
on.
yeah. I haven't taken
Come
a math
on.
class in 4 years, but I mean, there's a chance we don't fill out all our scholarships, which will be okay. But like I said, excited. I think the Alabama fans that are scared aren't diving deep into this. Yes, we're gonna lose some star players. Caleb Downs could lose them. That's gonna suck, but it's definitely gonna suck to see Caleb Downs come into Tuscaloosa wearing a G on his chest in the fourth
Oh,
game
that's gonna be so
next year.
sick.
But
Gonna look great. I did
Alabama's gonna be just fine.
I did want to say, and probably the last thing we'll talk about, or just the last thing I'll add on. You mentioned Tyler Booker, Jalen Milrow, I forget the Malachi Moore. they're staying, and they're not only going to be remembered as Nick Saban's kind of corner piece, also the start of the Kalen DeBoer
Pillars.
dynasty, whatever you want to call it. If there is success that Kalen DeBoer has, I think it's going to be kind of exactly how we remember, and you even remember, pretty much all of college football remembers it, the start of Kirby's, and it wasn't a dynasty at the time. Like Kalen DeBoer doesn't have to go in and win a national championship year two. Um, Kirby didn't win one till year five or whatever it was. But he made it year two with people who said they wanted to play for Kirby Smart. And granted, it was a different day and age than back then. The transfer portal was kind of a thing, but you didn't have 25 players enter it. You had like 3 to 4 enter per year. Um, but you did have guys like Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, Lorenzo Carter, Davin Bellamy all come back for their senior years. When Nick Chubb and Sony Michel, we know one of them went first round, one of them went 34th overall or 35th overall, whatever Nick Chubb went, but is now the best running back in the NFL. The two edge rushers, I mean, they were both draft picks, third and fourth rounds. But we had those guys come back, and Roquan Smith as well was a junior who those were Mark Richt's guys. He got them in there, but they stayed for Kirby Smart for that coaching staff. And we saw what they did. I mean, we almost won national championship year two with them. So even though we didn't win it, even though the success wasn't there until 2021, I mean, those guys were pivotal in changing the tide and, turning us into a powerhouse, what we are today. And so I think the same thing, and who knows if it's going to happen? Who knows if Kalen DeBoer has success? But if he does, I think we'll look back in 2024, even if and Georgia went 7-5 in Kirby's first year, even if Alabama goes 7-5, with some of those guys that decided to come back their senior years, decided to stay, especially in this day and age of football. I think it means a lot. But I don't fault any player for leaving a program, especially
I don't either.
coach. I mean, not only their head coach, especially all the position coaches. I mean, it's just there's so many. There's a lot of turnover going on. So I won't ever discredit a player leaving because of that.
Yeah, and kind of like you said, I mean, it's the same way for Nick Saban, except there was no transfer portal back when Nick Saban came to Alabama. His first year, we went 7-6. Second year, we were playing for an SEC championship game, and what a lot of people would say is was the national championship that year where we lost to Florida. And you remember guys like Julio Jones was Saban's first huge recruit, and Saban has said time and time again that if he didn't land Julio Jones, he has no idea what Alabama would look like today because Julio kind of made Alabama cool again for the first time. And I know you probably didn't hear this. Devontae Smith, the safety for Alabama right now, not the Heisman Trophy winner, the safety, who has announced coming back. I mean, basically released like a 2-page statement to Yay Alabama NIL Collective saying, I don't know why these guys are leaving. I mean, if you just sit down with Kalen DeBoer, he'll plant the vision for you. He'll show you how much he truly cares about each one of these guys on the team. He'll plant the vision. And a lot of guys have left, but I think that, like I said earlier, it says a lot about the guys who stayed. I mean, Isaiah Bond went to Texas. Kalen DeBoer called him. He didn't even answer the phone or even try to call him back. So guys like Isaiah Bond didn't even give Kalen DeBoer a shot, So not that they had to. I'm not saying Isaiah Bond had to or should have, but it sounds like Kalen DeBoer to a lot of the guys that are staying is already a fan favorite. A lot of the guys really like him and buy into his vision that he's kind of creating here at Alabama. And I'm one of those. I buy into his vision. And one other person that I did not mention that he brought along is he calls him his general manager. His name is Courtney Morgan. He is the black dude that got off the plane looking like Rick Ross, everybody was saying. He is responsible. He was at Michigan before he was with DeBoer at Washington. But in the national championship game, Courtney Morgan recruited 80% of the players on the field from both teams. He's a big-time recruiter, knows people nationally all over the country in the South, West Coast, North, Midwest, everywhere. He's going to be a huge asset to the recruiting trail. I already heard he's already on the trail getting ready, recruiting for Alabama. And he was here from day one with Kalen DeBoer. So he's going to be a huge piece, kind of a role that nobody really had at Alabama under Saban. But Courtney Morgan, you'll remember the name, and you'll see him up on 247 sites and Rivals and On3 and things like that. But that's enough talking about Alabama. We've talked about them for a long time, and I know we'll stay in the news. But Jake, let's welcome a couple teams into the SEC this upcoming year. It's already look-ahead season. We're already focused on 2024. 2023 is behind us. But how will Texas and Oklahoma respond to joining the SEC? I did a little deep dive here into their past recruiting cycles and their past records. But I'll list those out, and then we can kind of talk about how you think they're going to fit into the SEC next season. So let's start with Texas recruiting. In 2024, so this past class, Texas finished second in the country. Very good. 2023, they finished third. 2022, they finished fifth. So that's 3 years in a row they finished in the top five. 2021 was Sarkisian's first year. They finished 15th. Oklahoma in 2024, this past year, finished 11th. 2023, 6th. 2022, 10. 2022 was Brent Venables' first year. And then 2021, Lincoln Riley's last year, they finished 6th. Texas's record this past year, 12-2, playoff berth. 2022, 8-5. 2021, 5-7, Sarkisian's first season. Then Oklahoma, 2023, this year, 10-3, with a win over Texas. 2022, Brent Venables' first year, 6-7. So I want to, just from hearing those numbers, it's just something for the viewer just to think of. But entering the SEC, they're entering the best conference in college football, coming from the Big 12, who, yes, a very competitive conference in college football, but not near the quality of the SEC. How do you think Texas and Oklahoma fit into the SEC in 2024 and even beyond?
Yeah, for me, especially with, you might not completely agree with this, but with all the Bama coaches and players leaving their stock kind of falling and Ole Miss especially rising, I think Texas slides right into, the number 2 team in the SEC right after a playoff berth. They are losing a lot of their offense. Well, not even a lot. I mean, they're losing their top 2 receivers.
They're
They
losing
retain,
the big playmakers.
they retain their number 1 tight end though. That line
Third
still.
all.
Wait, is
Davian
Jadavian Sanders
Sanders,
gone?
NFL. Yep.
Oh,
All three of their starting receivers, NFL,
Jordan Whittington's gone?
And Jonathan Brooks, NFL.
I did not know Jordan Whittington was gone. Or I didn't know. Wow. Okay. Well, then, yeah, losing a lot of their offense, but the most important part of their offense is coming back in Quinn Ewers for 2024. And they are kind of restocking that wide receiver room. Like you said, Isaiah Bond is going there. They got Silas Bolden, who was really good at Oregon State. They got both of them. I'm sure they have recruits, like you said. I mean,
Casey
they've been in a top.
Kane, Casey Kane is he was their receiver 4 this year. He's pretty good
They've
player.
been stocking up a top 5 class the last 3 years, so they definitely have some weapons in there. I mean, just the biggest question mark is going to be their defense again, again. Where I mean, they're physical, they're an SEC defense, but where they've lacked and where they probably will lack again is just that secondary and the speed back there, where you got torched by Washington in the playoff. I think that can happen again. But luckily, I think your offense is going to be good enough to hang with a lot of these teams. Well, really all the teams in the SEC. Like I said, I think they're an SEC champ contender. I think they're almost not a lock for the playoff. The 12-team playoff, and we'll talk about that a little bit. The 12-team playoff, makes things interesting. We've never seen it before. So especially with how hard schedules are going to be, we'll see how it shakes out. I imagine there's going to be a 9-3 SEC team that slides into there, whether it be Georgia, whether it be Texas, whether it be Bama, whether it be Ole Miss. I think there's going to be someone. But with Texas specifically, I think they're going to be a contender for it. And I gave comparisons for each of the 2 teams coming in. I think they're comparable to LSU, where, and I kind of wanted to say this isn't like, this isn't SEC. Actually, it is. I kind of wanted to say they were A&M, but that was kind of disrespectful to Texas because A&M is bad. But my thing was before this year, Texas was just always overrated. Kind of like Miami was the team I was going to say. Sorry, not A&M. Miami, always overrated, always say they're back. They never end up being back. But Texas finally came back this year. They finally made the playoff, finally got some national recognition. And I think they're going to be in there kind of like LSU is, where some years they're going to be really good, fighting for a national championship. Some years might not be so great,
Yep.
I think it was 2020, 2021 when LSU was not very good after they won the national championship. They went like 7-5 or 8-4. I think that's what Texas is going to look like, where it's going to be high highs and low lows.
Yeah. And I'll kind of address Texas there too. I definitely think they slide into one of the top 3 teams in the SEC, like you said. Especially this upcoming year. They're going to have to replace a lot of their playmakers on offense. I mean, they're losing their first three receivers, a tight end, and their starting running back. So those are huge playmakers that are going off to the NFL. But they are bringing in Bond, they are bringing in Silas Bolden. So those would be two nice pieces to have. But the main thing that stands out to me about them, not even that Quinn Ewers is coming back, but they had a young offensive line a couple years ago when they played Alabama for the first time in Austin. Last year they got experience, they got a lot better, obviously went to the playoff, and they're all coming back again. And they've got some serious talent. Kelvin Banks will be back at tackle, one of their tackle spots. They've got some serious talent on the offensive line, especially with Georgia losing three of their guys on the offensive line. I know they'll still restock and be very good, but Texas is going to have the best offensive line in the SEC next season, in my opinion. And I think they may have one of the best defensive lines in the SEC. We saw them play amazing this past year as well. So not only are they getting better on defense, is what they need to show improvement on, especially because Sark is such a good offensive mind and offensive guru. But they're getting better on defense. They're getting better. They should be getting better in the secondary after this past season. It ended up hurting them in the playoff, but throughout the regular season, I mean, they went 11-1, 12-1 with a conference championship game. So I agree with you. I think Texas is going to slide up to that second spot in terms of tiers in the SEC. Not necessarily how they may finish next year. We'll get more into those kind of predictions down the road, but I definitely think Texas is one of the better programs in the conference, and that kind of leads us to Oklahoma.
Yeah. And just by the way, Georgia, we're only losing two linemen, Cedric Van Pran and Amarius Mims. Somehow, some way, Xavier Truss is coming back. I don't think he's going to be a starter next year. Maybe game one, but probably not after that. Anyway, Oklahoma's interesting to me. They were really dominant, not even dominant. They were like an automatic playoff berth entry every single year. Back around like 20, I can't remember their first year. I think it was 2016. 2016 to 2020. I think they made it like 3 out of 4 years. But they never won a playoff game. And I think when we think of Oklahoma, at least for me, I kind of think about them in the last couple of years where they're a really good team, but not that upper echelon. And I think we saw it in the bowl game against Arizona, where and like I said, I'm giving comparisons. When I see Oklahoma, I just see Missouri, and I don't know why.
I
Because
think that's
Oklahoma,
disrespectful to Missouri.
I'm not talking about last year Missouri. I'm just talking about the
Yeah.
program as a whole.
Okay.
Missouri last year was way better than Oklahoma last year. But I think that's disrespectful to Oklahoma to say that, which it probably is because Missouri is not a historically great program. Oklahoma kind of is. But I think this team is just going to take a little bit of work to get to double-digit wins. They have a decently easy schedule. I say decently easy. No team really, especially in the SEC, no team really has an easy schedule. But theirs is kind of as easy as it can come, where you don't have to play the extremely hard teams. I know they play Texas, obviously, but I think their second hardest game is Missouri. And then after that, and they play Bama too. But I think that's it. So their schedule isn't super hard. But I think next year, especially with 1 year, I'm forgetting their Jackson Arnold.
Yep.
With it being his first year starting,
Oh, Casey Thompson coming. Casey Thompson did transfer there. That could be a battle.
with Jackson Arnold's first year, he was just a depth piece. They're not going to get a quarterback from FAU to be their starting quarterback. But with Jackson Arnold being his first time starting, especially now in the SEC, I think it's going to take him a year. I think it's going to take this team to just adjust to the team speed that because they struggled against UCF, Cincinnati, other teams last year, especially when you have to go up against Missouri and Alabama and Texas, and you played against Texas last year, but you get the point. I think they're going to struggle a decent amount next year, but I think if you give them a few years, especially, I meant to say this earlier about Texas, but with what we've seen with Brent Venables and Steve Sarkisian, every single year that they've gone up in wins, and granted, it's only been 2 years for Oklahoma, but 6-6 to 10-3 is incredible. It's going to go down most likely, but still, that's a lot of progress. And so I think, his vision is already being put to the test. and I think it's gonna, come to light at some point. I think you just got to give Jackson Arnold a year and give that team a year, because they're gonna lack team speed and the chemistry in order to compete for an SEC spot, I think. But who knows? Maybe they can slide into the 12 or 11 spot in the playoff. But I just think it's going to take a couple of years for them.
Yeah, I agree. I think there will be an adjustment period for Oklahoma, which is kind of crazy to say because
Yeah.
Oklahoma beat Texas last year, But and where a lot of how I remember Oklahoma, and I think how everyone remembers them from their college football playoff days was high-powered offense, terrible defense. And now that's kind of been flipped a little bit because they don't have the most talented players on offense or skillful players, especially at the skill positions like receiver. I mean, their number one receiver last year was Stoops' son. So, I mean, he's,
Bruce Stoops.
yeah,
No. Sure.
Bob. No, I don't know his name, but Stoops Jr. Little baby Stoops. Baby Stoops was their best receiver last year, and he probably won't even be a draft pick this year. So they need to improve
Drake
on the skill.
Stoops.
Drake Stoops. So they need to improve on the skill side of offense. I think Jackson Arnold will be a pretty good quarterback in the SEC. He's got a lot of talent, and they've got some good running backs, and they've got a pretty solid O line. They just need to get better at receiver and at tight end. And then on the defensive side, Danny Stutzman. I mean, we'll talk about next week.
Good.
We'll talk about some of the best returning players to each SEC team. Danny Stutzman might be the guy for Oklahoma. He's one of the better linebackers in college football. They're pretty solid up front. They got to get better in the back end though. So I do think there will be an adjustment period for Oklahoma. I do think I would slide them anywhere from 6 to 8 in the conference. I think that's a good spot for them, just in terms of rankability right now. If you had to rank them, there will be an adjustment period for them instead of Texas. I think Texas is more built for the SEC right now than Oklahoma is. But like you said, give Brent Venables a year or two. Recruiting in as an SEC school is only going to help them. And I mean, they've been recruiting at six 1 year in 2023, 11 this past year. I think that's only going to help them as well, being in the SEC. So look for them to get back into the top 10 in recruiting next cycle. But yeah, I think these are two great additions to the SEC, and I think it's definitely going to make the conference more interesting, especially with the elimination of divisions. I really like that as well. But we'll move on from that. Let's talk about the college football playoff format last, and let's just go to the biggest players to be replaced for each SEC team. I know you only did a few of the SEC teams, but I went ahead and did all of them. And a lot of these teams, we're not going to touch on it for long. But it was interesting when I made my list to see how many of these guys went into the portal. Were the best player for their team last year at an SEC school and left to go to the portal. And then which guys went to the NFL. So let's just start. Let's just go. You call it out. Since you did the most important teams. You call it out, and we'll kind of go off your list, and then I'll rebut and we'll talk about it.
Okay. And a lot of these, I kind of did. I didn't even do players. I did like just more than just positions. Like for we'll start with LSU because they're the biggest skew. I just did the whole offense. I mean, that whole offense is being
Yeah.
restructured. You need a new QB. You need a new wide receiver 1. You need a new wide receiver 2. I think wide receiver 3 as well. I could be wrong about that. You need a new RB1 because he just transferred to Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Diggs.
Yes.
I think
yes, you're right.
Diggs transferred to
Big get for Ole Miss though, too.
So you need a whole new offense. And obviously the most important player to replace is Jaden Daniels. But you're about to have 3 players most likely drafted in the first round. Brian Thomas, I think he'll go first round, somewhere like 20 to 28, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. So you're going to need a whole lot to replace. Who knows if they do? I don't have a whole lot of trust in that offense because we saw they were really good in 2022 in Brian Kelly's first year. And then last year, I mean, that defense was absolutely horrendous. And then their offense was really good. But, I mean, it's just been extremely inconsistent since BK came to office.
Yeah, it'll be definitely really interesting to see how he flips the offense. They also got a couple of guys on the O line in the transfer portal. One of them was a really good tackle that they had that's playing right tackle for him last year. Who's still, I think he's the number 2 player in the transfer portal right now. I forget his name, but yeah, I think this one was pretty easy, right? You lost your Heisman quarterback, Jaden Daniels. He's going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. probably top three, if we're being honest with each other. But I mean, it's hard, no matter who you are, to replace Jane Daniels or the Heisman Trophy winner from the previous year. Garrett Nussmeier is a really good quarterback. I think he'll be really good for LSU, but you're not going to replace the production Jane Daniels has. Not only was he just an on-spot passer, but his running ability was insane. And not having that on the team, because Garrett Nussmeier is not a runner by any stretch of the means. So they're losing that. They're losing that in their offense as well. I do think they get, and we'll just talk about LSU for a second. I do think they get better on defense, but they're also getting a lot worse on offense. So it'll be interesting to see they're one of the more interesting teams in the SEC, I think, this year, just because of there's so much, flexibility that they're going to have with their team from last year. It could look completely opposite. They had really bad defense last year, really good offense. They could have really good defense this year and really bad offense. You never know. So, yeah, I think that was a big loss for them. For me, it was pretty easy, Jane Daniels.
And then again, I'll kind of keep it with that. For Texas, and this is even true because I just thought it was their first two receivers, all receivers. You lost a wide receiver 1, 2, 3, and number 1 tight end. So you have to replace all of them. And like we've said, they've done a decent job in going to get Isaiah Bond and Silas Bolden. I really like Silas Bolden. I thought he was really good at Oregon State. I think he's going to do great things there. But still, that's a lot to replace, and that's a lot of chemistry to build up with Quinn Ewers. So that's kind of scary, especially if I'm a Texas Longhorn fan. It's kind of scary looking in on that. But if anyone can do it, Sark can do it.
Yep. For me, I kind of went a different route. I went Jonathan Brooks, the running back there, the starting running back. He really emerged as the bell cow mid season, and they lost him due to an ACL tear towards the end of the year. And you could tell their offense wasn't the same without him in. Cedric Baxter's a really good player. He's going to end up probably being one of the better running backs in college football when his career is all said and done. He'll probably be a 3-year guy and go to the NFL. But Jonathan Brooks was their main guy on the ground last year. He did do some damage in the air as well, catching passes from Quinn Ewers. But you could just tell that offense wanted to run the football. No matter Sark is a great play caller, and he makes a lot of great passing play calls. But when it gets down to it, I know from his time at Alabama, he loved to run the ball with Najee Harris. And he loved to run the ball with Jonathan Brooks last year. And I think that's going to be a big loss for them. I think Cedric Baxter is going to be a good player, but Jonathan Brooks was one of the better runners of the football in college last year. And Cedric Baxter is going to have to get better at doing that. But yeah, I think that's a big loss for them. I think that Isaiah Bond, Silas Bolden, and Casey Kane will end up being really good receivers for them and step in. They won't be as good as what they had. We know that, but losing Jonathan Brooks was big, and I just kind of think that was a kind of an undervalued player on their team last year.
Yeah, we'll keep it with the groups and go to Bama. And I think it was before the call that we were talking about. There's not a lot of spots. I think there's a good amount of weak spots on this team, of course, now that you can look with the transfer portal. But there's never been two glaring weaknesses, especially at these two positions. Wide receivers and corners are going to be extremely hard to replace because Bama just lost their number 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3 wide receiver. Also, their number 1 receiving tight end. I know he wasn't number 1 on the depth chart, but he was the number 1 receiving tight end. So that's going to be really hard to replace, especially because Ryan Williams is not a lock to re-sign or just to sign back to Bama. Who knows what's going to happen with that? And even if he does, I mean, having to trust, and he's really good. He's extremely good, very talented. But having to trust a freshman wide receiver who isn't early enrolling would be extremely hard to do because there's not a whole lot of guys in that room. And I think their 2023 recruiting class was really good at wide receiver because I know Jalen Halo is really good. But outside of that, it's pretty thin. There's not a lot of names in there. There's Kobe Prentice, who got a little bit of run. I know there's Kendrick Law, who's kind of been a gadget back, kind of went into running back, kind of played out wide. Just not a lot of answers in that room. And then corners wise, we obviously know they just lost their
first five guys.
Yeah, they lost their first 5 guys. Damani Jackson might slide in there. Jalen Mbakwe, however you pronounce his last name, might slide in there. But I mean, having to trust a freshman corner, because that is probably the hardest position to play on the field. And we've seen, whoever it is, freshman corners typically do not come right into the SEC and succeed. And he is early enrolling, right?
Yes, he's already on campus.
So that's good for him. But Damani Jackson, he was a former 5-star, but let's not act like he was a 5-star at USC. He did not perform well. And I wanted him. I think he measures up well. He runs super fast. He's long. He's lengthy. But I mean, he struggled at USC a lot in a Pac-12 defense. And so these aren't certified dudes that are coming in. Jalen Mbakwe is super fast, you know, kind of like, I mean, Damani Jackson was the number one corner coming out of high school. I think he was a top 10 recruit. And some of these guys just don't live up to the hype. And maybe it was just the scenery. Maybe he needs a new place. But I mean, and even if you want to get past the starters, let's say they're good. Um, there's a lot of injuries that go on in college football, obviously. And so who are the people behind them? You need guys. I mean, like when Kool-Aid went down in the SEC championship, Trey Amos was there to back him up, and played pretty flawlessly. If you have someone go down, and especially, I mean, because we had Julian Humphrey go down in the middle of the year, didn't play the last 3 games, and we had guys that stepped up and played well. I don't know if Bama will be able to do that next year if they sustain a long injury to one of those guys, and that's assuming that these guys are going to play really well.
Yeah. And when you're looking at the receiver room, like you said, we've got 9 receivers on scholarship currently right now. 5 of them are freshmen. 4 of those freshmen are true freshmen. So a lot of new faces, a lot of unproven, no experience, but a lot of talent. I mean, let's not get that wrong. I mean, there's tons of talent in that receiver room, tons of talent in that cornerback room, just unproven with little to no experience. I'm actually very excited to see what Maurice Linguist does with Damani Jackson and Jalen Mbakwe. I know he's a great developer of talent, especially in the secondary. So we'll see what happens there. But I was thinking right along the same lines as you. I just picked a player for each team rather than I just went with somebody. It cannot be understated how important it is when you can lock up one side of the field. And that's what Kool-Aid McKinstry provided for 2, maybe even 3 years at Alabama. That's why he's my biggest player to be replaced, because Kool-Aid was basically put on an island every game and was told, hey, you got this guy, and was maybe thrown out 1 or 2 times because it was understood around college football that he was the best cover corner in the game. And Terrion Arnold was a great piece too. You could have gone hit with him there. He had a great year last year, but Kool-Aid was better longer. Was going to be the first corner off the board in the NFL draft this upcoming year. So I mean, his importance and his importance in special teams as well was big. So yeah, he's going to be a guy that's going to be tough to replace, but someone's going to have to do it. So I liked everything you said there.
Yeah. And then I only have 2 teams left that I gave names or groups with. And this is exactly along the same lines with Missouri. I mean, offensively, they're losing no one. Like absolutely. I mean, they're gaining offensively with
Yeah.
Caden Green from Oklahoma, the freshman who started 14 games and was a freshman All-American. But defensively, and again, they're gaining defensively. They got Darius Smith. They got I can't remember. I think it's a secondary player from a good school. I don't know. But I mean, they're losing Ennis Rakestraw, who's a 3-star recruit. Georgia really wanted him out of high school, but he picked Missouri, was a day 1 starter there. And then he's probably going to be a first-round pick in the draft, or sorry, first-round pick in the draft. And he's not as elite as Kool-Aid was. Kool-Aid would just lock down, like you said, would just lock down any receiver he covered. Ennis Rakestraw was pretty close to that, especially for a Missouri standard. And it was a Missouri defense that wasn't great at the start, but they improved a ton by the end of the season. And so and it's Missouri, because it's not like you can immediately replace that guy. Because I mean, like we've talked about with Alabama, I mean, they're going to have 2 5-stars probably starting at corner. Missouri doesn't have that luxury. Whether that 5-star lives up to the hype or not, who cares? They're going to have like probably a sophomore 3-star who has to replace Ennis Rakestraw, who probably won't be too great. So it sucks when you get someone like that. He only plays for 3 years at Missouri. It doesn't really affect us at Bama or Georgia as much as it would a Missouri.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I went with Ennis Rakestraw the second. I think he'll be a second-round pick, maybe first-round pick. We'll see what happens. But man, you want to talk about Missouri? They're a team on the rise. Them and Ole Miss, they're gonna be scary in 2024. I'm calling it now. They're gonna be very scary. But yeah, you mentioned everything. His significance to the team was huge. Losing him is gonna be a big deal for them. They're gonna have to really rely on whoever it is to replace him. But I think I know where you're going next. It's your team that you saved for last. So I'll go ahead and just tell tell everyone who I know you have. Brock Bowers. It's going to be Brock Bowers. It's got to be Brock Bowers. Um, Best tight end in college football. I don't know history because I don't know if I can go how far
It's
you can go
history.
back, but
It's
dude
history.
was absolutely dominant. And in every facet, he's gonna be a top 10 pick in the NFL. I would be shocked if he wasn't picked in the top 10. He's gonna be one of the better players, like just players overall. I mean, people in the NFL they typically pick for need, but there are a chance sometimes where people will pick the best available player, and Brock's got to be in the top five. I mean, you don't see tight ends come out that are that good. The last one was Kyle Pitts, but I think Brock Bowers is better because Kyle Pitts may have a better receiving ability than Brock Bowers does, but Brock Bowers adds so much just in the blocking game as well that I think Kyle Pitts didn't add. So yeah, it's Brock Bowers. We've talked about him so much this year, and then I'll let you kind of have the last word on that, and then I'll just fill out the rest of the SEC.
Yeah, I do have two names, but of course it is Brock Bowers. Right next to him, I have obvious reasons. Um, but you nailed it on the head, and I'm surprised you did. Um, it's so funny watching people who cover NFL, college football for a living. They get paid to do it, and then they go and analyze Brock Bowers, and they one say he's too small, or two they say he can't block. They have never watched him play a game of football in his life then, because Brock Bowers is a tremendous blocker. He is a little bit undersized, I will say that. He's 6'4", 225, which isn't huge as a tight end, but he will give his blood, sweat, and tears. I mean, we both know it. In that SEC championship game, he had to be taken from the field. Every single time he went down to the ground, he would limp up and have to limp up back to the line of scrimmage, and then would give 110%. Um, and I wondered what that looked like. And then finally, I was watching the NFL playoffs, and that's Puka Nacua, where Puka is, and it's a little bit different because Puka went undrafted. I think no,
He was
he
the
got
fifth
drafted
round
in
pick.
the
He
fifth
was the
round.
fifth round pick.
Sorry, he got picked. He got drafted in the fifth round. But Puka does not have like outstanding traits. He's not very fast. He's not super tall. Doesn't jump super high. But he fights to not go down every single time. He fights to get the ball. He just puts in so much effort. And I think that's going to be Brock Bowers, but multiply that tenfold because he has the traits as well. But he has the one of one trait to not go down, to put his heart and soul into everything he does. So it's going to be so hard to replace him because one, he's the best receiver on the team. Two, he was the best blocker for his size on the team. I mean, he pancaked so many guys as a 6'4", 225 tight end, and he was pancaking guys bigger than him. So it's just impressive what he did on the football field. Can't wait to watch him in the NFL. But he will fall. I guarantee you he will fall, and he's going to be the steal of the draft because it's going to be like Jalen Carter, where, for different reasons. But Jalen Carter should have been a top QB, I don't know. But let's say he should have been a top 4 pick, went ninth or eighth, whatever it was, to the Eagles. It has been a steal. Brock Bowers is going to be the same thing. Should go top 5. He won't. He'll go like 15th to whoever, and is going to do absolutely amazing things in the NFL. But then I went on a ramble there. I'll keep this one kind of short. Javon Bullard. I don't think Brock Bowers is as hard to replace, especially because he didn't play as much this past year due to injury. And Oscar Delp is going to be able to do a lot of what he did, and we have a lot of tight ends coming in to do that. Javon Bullard, and I know we've talked about Malachi Starks and Caleb Downs, but Javon Bullard was the leader of that defense. He knew exactly what was happening at all points on the field. I was listening to Brooks Austin talk earlier about Caleb Downs, where he managed his side of the field this year and also would know what was going down on the other side of the field. There were a lot of times where Javon did that every play. There are a lot of times he would have to, forgo his side of the field and go help on the other side, because he knew what was happening the whole time. And, that's all built on experience. He put first round film on the tape, but was 5'11", 180 pounds and runs like a 4.6, not tremendous stats. And people who watched him play would probably never know that because he looks dominant whenever he's out there playing either star or safety. But I just think that's going to be so hard to replace. And I mean, who's better to do it than Caleb Downs? Especially if we don't get him. It's going to be scary to see what's going to happen if we don't get Caleb Downs. So I think that's going to be the hardest position. Do
Jake,
what?
Jake Pope.
No, Jake Pope is not going to start.
Well, funny that all the ones that you mentioned are all guys who'll be going to the NFL. I've got a few guys on the rest of my list who are portaling away from their team, but I'll finish it with NFL guys and then I'll go to portal guys for teams. So Auburn, DJ Hall, their best corner, will be going to the NFL. He was the guy that I thought was the hardest player to be replaced for them. You could have said, well, no, he's coming back. I was going to say Jarquez Hunter, but he's coming back.
What about Jalen Simpson?
You can say Jalen Simpson too, but I thought DJ Hall had a really good game against Alabama. I thought he played all right against Georgia too. So he showed up in big time moments. We can always when your number one corner leaves, that's always a big scary thought because it's one of the more important positions. I think it's probably the second most important position on the field besides quarterback is your first corner. So I'll go DJ Hall at Auburn. At Florida, we know this guy. The offense, although it ran through Graham Mertz, it really ran through Ricky Pearsall, a receiver, and he's not going to be a guy that goes high in the draft. Like he's kind of a Javon Bullard type of guy where he's not going to run the fastest 40. He's not going to look the best, but that dude can straight up ball, and he might end up being a Puka Nakua type receiver because he gets the ball on every play too. And I think he'll be a late NFL draft pick. And we've seen him make some incredible catches in his time. He was receiver one for Florida. So I'll give Ricky Pearsall some love there with receiver one to Florida at Florida, now going to the NFL. At Kentucky, Ray Davis, the running back, kind of came out of nowhere. And then towards the end of the year, we even talked on the show, is he the best running back in the SEC at one point during the year? But I think it's kind of clear after the year that, Cody Schrader, Quinshon Judkins, those guys were better. But Ray Davis had a really outstanding year. And the ball and at Kentucky, through their offense, they want to run the ball. It's no stranger. They've always wanted to do that when they had Benny Snell back in the day. So the running back Ray Davis at Kentucky. And then a couple more NFL guys. South Carolina, Spencer Rattler. Yes, he didn't really have a lot of guys around him this year. Xavier Legette was nice. Jacarian Joyner played all right. But, I mean, it's going to be a big drop-off for them. I mean, they're going from Spencer Rattler to Robbie Ashford. So I don't know how much longer Shane Beamer is going to have his job there in South Carolina, but I definitely do know this. Giving Robbie Ashford the keys to your program is not going to keep your job long. So Spencer Rattler there. And then finally, Tennessee. I went with Aaron Beasley, their middle linebacker going to the NFL, led the team in tackles. Was also pretty good in sacks this year, a name that not a lot of people know, but a lot of Tennessee fans know the name and know that he'll be replaced. He may be a little bit easier to replace than most of the guys on this list, but definitely, his presence will be not being there will be felt by the defense. Now let's do a few more players. These guys transferred away from their team. KJ Jefferson at Arkansas, now at UCF. Never was the best quarterback in the SEC, but always a pretty reliable guy. And Arkansas's offense played through his strength. So it'll be interesting to see what Arkansas's offense looks like this year. At Mississippi State, Will Rogers portaled to Washington, but now obviously back in the portal with everything that's gone on with them. Don't know what's going to happen with Will Rogers. You hate to see it. But Mississippi State, I mean, he's been there. He's the leading passer in SEC history. He's been there for 4 years and set records at Mississippi State. So be interesting to see what their offense looks like with him not there. Oklahoma, I know they have Jackson Arnold, but Dylan Gabriel is a huge loss at quarterback. He had a great season last year. Right now, if I had to have a Heisman frontrunner for 2024, I'd probably pick Dylan Gabriel. I mean, best bang for your buck at a casino more than likely for odds on him. But yeah, I think Dylan Gabriel's gonna be great at Oregon. I think Oklahoma will be fine, but I mean that's a big loss. You're losing a Heisman caliber type quarterback there. At Ole Miss, it's Quinshon Judkins transferred to Ohio State, and Jake Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins is going to be the best running back duo in college football. I don't know which one of them is going to start. I mean, it'll be interesting. Probably Travion Henderson because of familiarity, but that's going to be a great running back duo. And I know that Ole Miss got Logan Diggs from LSU, but it's hard to replace one of the better running backs in college football. And I think Quinshon Judkins is a top 3 running back in college football. Travion Henderson's a top 3, and he's right there with him now on the same team. Ohio State's going to be scary next year. I'm sure we'll talk a lot about them next year. 2 more teams, Texas A&M, Evan Stewart to Oregon, joining Dylan Gabriel over at Oregon. That's going to be a really great duo there for Dan Lanning's squad. Big loss for Texas A&M. They also lost Anais Smith this past year and Moose Muhammad. Both of those guys are done. All three of those guys are done. Those were their three top receivers. So be interesting to see what A&M is like without them. Connor Wegman won't have as many answers there at receiver. And then finally, Vanderbilt. You can really say receiver room here because they lost London Humphrey and Will Sheppard. Will Sheppard, I went ahead and put Will Sheppard because he's been their best receiver for the past 3 seasons. He is now at Colorado. So that and Colorado's got a really scary offense looking next year with Shadur and obviously Xavier what was his name? Xavier Weaver, Travis Hunter, and Will Sheppard all in the same receiver room. It'll be nice. So Colorado, I'm sure we'll talk about them a lot next season. But that's kind of all we've got for biggest player to be replaced for each SEC team. I just feel like we should cover all of them because why not? We're in the offseason. But let's talk about the 2024 college football playoff format. 5 auto bids, conference champs from the Power Four and the best group of 5 team. You got 7 best teams remaining regardless of conference. Top 4 seeds get an automatic bye. The first round will be played on college campuses. Round 2 is bowl games at bowl sites. You got round 3 and the national championship. So Jake, what's your opinion on the 2024 playoff format that we'll see this upcoming year?
Yeah, I know a lot of people have really strong opinions on it. I don't. And I think it's because we haven't seen it. And I don't know what to expect. Because I know the way it works is the top 4, or I guess now they'll only 4, the power four teams get an automatic bid, whoever wins the championship. And then like the number 1 group of 5 team gets an automatic bid somewhere. And
I
then
think they're automatically the 12 seed.
okay, automatically. Wait, what if they're higher? What if they're like ranked 6?
I guess they could, but I think they're the 12th seed. So I saw one this past year that would have had Tulane at 12. So
Interesting. That makes sense, I guess. And then outside of that, it's the top 7 ranked teams. So, like I said, I don't know what's going to happen. I think like a 9-3 SEC team could sneak into there. But I think we'll find a lot out once we get there. I think it's sick how not the top 4 teams, the 5 through 8 teams are going to be hosting a playoff game. I think that is absolutely sick. And I would love to go to a playoff game inside of Sanford Stadium. I think that would be amazing. However, I think it is a huge advantage for the teams that have a bye. We've seen what football is. We know how dangerous, how aggressive, and how many injuries are sustained in just one game, and especially if that's a huge injury. I mean, just like that, Brock Bowers did whatever to his ankle and was out for pretty much the rest of the season. Was not the same for the rest of the season. I mean, we've seen it all over. It happens in every single game. So there will be something like that where they're playing in the first round of the playoffs, and there's going to be actual games sometimes. Sometimes it's going to be 45-0. That's just the nature of this playoff. You're going to have 5 play 12. The 5 seed play the 12 seed, and it's going to be Tulane matched up against Texas, and it's going to be ugly. It is what it is. But then you're going to have some people get hurt, and it's just going to be a huge advantage for the top 4. But I'm also interested to see how rusty are those teams going to be when they go to play. They're most likely it's going to be 1 versus 8, 2 versus 7, blah blah blah. When those teams go to play, how rusty are those top 4 seeds going to be? Because we've seen it in baseball where the top teams get a bye, and baseball is a little bit different. But the top teams get a bye, and then once they face the teams who just won the wild card or the divisional, they end up losing a lot of the time. This year, all 4 teams lost who had byes. I don't think it'll be like that, but like I said, we'll get the answers once we get there. I have no clue because I feel like it might be 50-50. But if they're really the best of the best, they'll kick the rust. They don't need another game to be able to do that. So at the end of the day, I think it'll be good for college football. Of course, it's more college football to watch. And of course, how bowl season has gone. A lot of people think it's worthless. No point in playing those games. This is going to bring a lot more games to play, and hopefully a lot of fun games to watch. So I'm excited for it. And at the end of the day, I think the best team is going to be crowned. Even more so than the past few years. I think especially this past year, people look at it, they don't know if Michigan was the best team at the end of the day. When there's 12 teams in the playoff and you have to win every single game to get to the last one, a fluke can't do that. A fluke can win you one game. A fluke can even win you two games. I don't think it can win you.
An injury to a quarterback is huge, and that could always happen with playing more games, sure. But I'll be honest, I like the four team playoff better. I even like the BCS better.
I
Than
don't like the BCS better.
I actually like the BCS. But I do think this is going to be good. There will be less opt-outs, especially from the teams that make the playoffs. So that'll be a plus. Um, but I don't think bowl games are meaningless, and I think a lot of people in college football that are involved in college football don't think it is either.
Yeah.
But I do think there will be a lot more opt-outs if you don't make the playoff with the 12 seat with a 12. Because all the New Year's Six bowl games are now the 12. So we'll see how that goes. But I don't like the auto bid. I don't like that at all. I think if you win your conference, you should just be good enough and confident enough that you'll be a top 12 team in college football. And I certainly don't like a group of five team making it. If a group of five team was a top 12 team and they deserved it, they'd be put in. But a group of five team in my opinion, has no business playing Power Five or Power Four, whatever you want to talk about. Because that Tulane team this year, if they were the best group of five team, they would have gotten smacked by who was the number five? Well, they might have beaten Florida State this year. Ooh, I don't know, but I mean, they probably would have
There,
lost a really bad Florida State
the
team.
reason I don't have a problem with it is because I mean, of course you're gonna have it some years like that, but also throwing it back to 2021, that Cincinnati team was really good.
They were, they
And,
were,
the game wasn't exactly close with Bama,
yeah,
but it wasn't an absolute blowout. What was it? 27-6?
yeah. It
I
was
think it was.
controlled. That whole game was controlled by Alabama,
Yeah,
if I'm remembering.
yeah, it was definitely controlled, but that team could definitely beat the number five
Yeah.
team, especially if it was
Yeah. But
FSU.
also think that team was also deservingly a top 12 team.
Yeah, that's
There,
fair.
there's a chance that the group of five team next year will not be a deservingly top 12 team. And
And
then just like with the four team playoff, that fifth team is getting left out like Florida State, and they're gonna hate it. Well, that 13th team, who let's just say just for kicks, it's out a 9-3 Alabama. A 9-3 Alabama could get left out of the playoff as a 13 seed than a 12 seed Tulane who went 11-2 and was the best group of five team. That's going to happen at some point. It
yeah.
could happen the first year. It may not happen until 10 years down the road, like we had this year with Florida State. But that's going to happen.
The,
Someone's going to get left out, and that's not going to be good.
if I'm playing devil's advocate, because the number five team, whoever gets left out, could 100% win a natty. I think Georgia could have won the national championship. I think FSU could have won the national championship, especially with Jordan Travis. They can win the national championship.
Yeah.
I don't think there will ever be a year where the number 12 team can win a national championship. Even if it is,
You're probably right.
If Bama is 9-3, they won't. If they look good, they will not be ranked past 12. They will be ranked probably in the top 10 if they're 9-3. But if they're 9-3 and they look really bad, they won't make the playoff because they won't be able to win it. So I don't think it's terrible to put in the best group of five team because at least now you're solidified a spot if you are the best. Just because I don't think it's not gonna ruin the playoff.
I don't think it's going to ruin it, but we know the backlash from Florida State fans this year. And yes, they may not a 13 seed or the 13th best team in college football. Let's say devil's advocate, like you said, is a 9-3 Alabama. Let's say it's a 9-3, Georgia. We could say 9-3 Georgia. If you were a student at Georgia or a fan of Georgia and you were 9-3 and you were left out for a 2-loss group of five team or a 1-loss group of five team that you would have been favored by 10 points on a neutral field. Who knows if Georgia, I mean, probably they wouldn't win the playoff if they were 9-3, the 13th best team in the country. But try telling that fan base that. That fan base is not going to be happy.
Yeah.
And there's
at least
people in college football who aren't, too.
At least now you didn't lose it because of subjectiveness.
Yes, but at the same time, there was subjectiveness involved in making that decision to have a group of five team in the beginning. I mean, the group of five voted for that, or really not the group of five, the Power Four commissioners voted for that. So
But also, I know me as a Georgia fan, and I know most Georgia fans. Twitter fans are excluded. Twitter fans are awful. We all know it. Bama fans included. Bama fans, Georgia fans, Texas fans, you throw them out there. They are not actually going to be mad that a 9-3 team got left out because we all know that's not deserving. A 13-0 team is very much deserving of a playoff spot. A
right.
9-3 team, not so much.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
some cases it might be better that your team get left out because you could be blown out by the 5 seed,
yeah.
especially because you're going on the road in their place.
They might argue that they're a good team, which can still be true. I mean, you can be 9-3 and be a good team. Because I can imagine, especially, say it's this year, for example. Let's just throw that out there. Say it's Georgia who gets left out. We're number 12. And we're 9-3 with losses to Ole Miss, Texas, and Bama, our three best teams on the schedule. That means we beat Clemson, Auburn, Tennessee, um, a couple other teams. We beat good teams, but we lost the three biggest games that we played. So, I mean, I would know we don't deserve to be in the playoff if we lose our three biggest games. And if we lose our three biggest games, there is not a shot in the world that we win four straight against, seemingly all three of those teams would be ahead of us anyway. So there's not a shot in the world that we would win four games to win the national championship anyway.
Well, here's another scenario. 2019 Alabama finished the year 13th with losses at home to one of the best college football teams of all time in LSU. Then we lost that game by 13. And then we went on the road with a backup quarterback against Auburn and lost. Mac Jones threw 2 pick-sixes, and that team was finished 13th. That team was a very good football team. I mean, they won the national championship the next year with Mac Jones at quarterback. They would be getting left out for a group of five team. I mean, sure, that team was not going to beat 2019 LSU. I mean, they weren't going to beat 2019 LSU or any other team that played against them probably. They probably could have made some noise in the playoff, but they weren't going to win the whole thing. But yes, that I've
Well,
been pissed that year if that team would have got left out.
what's
Uh,
funny about that, though, didn't Mac Jones become the starter that year because Tua was hurt?
well, in what year? 2019 or 20?
2019. 19.
Tua was a starter, but yeah, Tua did
Yeah,
something
didn't Tua,
and then Mac Jones came in. Yeah.
yeah, Tua got hurt. So they were left with a backup QB.
Yeah. But also
Would
a
have
lot
got left
different.
out with a backup QB.
Mac Jones performed a lot better that year than Tate Rodemaker or Brock Glenn did this year. Mac
In
Jones,
2019, Mac
yeah.
Jones was okay in
Mac
2019.
Jones
He
played
threw two pick sixes
besides
against
the two
Auburn
pick
and lost
sixes
them the game.
besides 2 pick-sixes against Auburn, he played a phenomenal game. And I don't even put that game on him. I mean, he 2 pick-sixes is bad, yes. One of them was a horrible throw, one of them was rushed, but believe me, I remember that game like any other.
That's Joe Flacco against against the Texans.
Yeah, actually that's actually a very good comparison. But I thought Mac Jones played fine. And then he played good against Michigan in the bowl game, but that's besides the point. It'll definitely be different for college football this upcoming year with the playoff format. But I am excited. I'm looking forward to it. More quality games to watch. That's all I care about in the end
I
of
was
the
about to say, at the very least, at least it's quality games, more
It
quality.
sucks for the players because they're going to have to play more games, and I'm sure they're not wanting to do that, especially with the way the NFL is. It's going to take a lot off, maybe some years off your
Did
NFL career. But
Did you notice though they added an additional bye week? I had no
yes,
clue,
there's 2 bye weeks. Yep. Yep.
which I think is very important for them
Yeah.
because, like you said, they could be playing 17 games, which
Yeah.
is a lot for a college kid.
Yeah.
Because that's also, I mean, we think of these people as higher than ourselves. I mean, they're still kids. They're 18. Brian Williams is going to be 16 years old. His
17. Yeah.
Oh wait, no.
Right now,
Sorry.
he'll be 17.
He turns 17 on February, whenever he signs. He's
Yeah.
going to be 17 in his first class. There's a lot of kids like that,
Yeah.
especially early enrolling. So it's insane what we expect of these
And a
kids.
lot of people will say it's preparing you for the NFL because the NFL is a 17 regular game season. But remember, less than 1% of college football players go on to play in the NFL. So,
And also they do that for a living. They don't have anything else to do.
well,
I
now
mean,
I guess you could say they're getting it for a living with NIL, but
yeah, but
it's
they also do
better now.
school for a living.
That's true, but these guys are now getting paid. So there's a lot of different ways you can look at this. Hopefully we enlightened you guys a little bit tonight talking about that. More to come. Next week, we'll be back with episode 39. It'll be season 2, episode 3 next week. So this is season 2, episode 2. I just went ahead and counted last week as the first week of season 2 since it was the off season. So we're officially in the off season. But believe me, I don't think both of us can't wait for next season. I especially can't wait because I'm sick and tired of talking about recruiting and transfer portal and new staff and Kalen DeBoer. So I'm
I
just ready to
especially
get back off the field. So
I especially can't wait to watch Malachi Starks and Caleb Downs be the best safety duo ever in college football. That's
I
gonna
can
be
confirm this that next week we will know what Caleb Downs' decision is. So next week we will probably react to that decision, whether that is him staying at Alabama, him going to Georgia, or him pulling a wild card and going
and going to Ohio
to
State.
Ohio State. So we'll talk about that next week. But for the moment, we thank you guys for joining us. Remember to like, subscribe, leave us a message, tell some people about us. But we'll always be here. And Just Saying will be back next week. So with that being said, roll Tide.
Go Dogs.